Welcome back, everybody. This is Eric here with Iraq Veteran 8888. All right, today we've got a very unique video for you. I've got a Twitter poll that I want to share with you, and I want to elaborate on it. And I'm also going to share a bunch of your comments on this particular poll as well. So if you click the video, you probably already know what this is about. But I polled people on, all right, knowing what you know now, do you think the United States military would fire on their own people if ordered to? Wow, that's a pretty scary question right there just from the get-go. But what's even scarier is the results. All right, let's take a look at the results. 77.4% of you said yes, the United States military would fire on its own people if ordered to. 22.6% of respondents said no. This particular poll was conducted over a 24-hour period, and anybody could vote in it, whoever saw the poll. The poll was seen by 389,000 people. It was shared 865 times. We received nearly 2,000 comments, and the poll received 51,928 votes. Wow, that's crazy. So what does this really say? What's the purpose, right, of even figuring this out? Why is this an important question? I think it kind of gives you an idea of what is in people's minds right now. You know, how scary, not only the world is just scary right now, there's all this saber rattling and literal wars that are going on all over the world and things like that. But there's a lot of, social unrest on many different levels here in this country. And, the keg is a brewing, as they say. It's a bubbling over, right? And some people have been the frog in the boiling pot that's come up to a slow boil, and before you know it, here you are, a boiling frog, and there's no escape. That water feels nice and lukewarm and comfortable until it's not. And, I did pose this particular question about maybe 2 months ago as well on Twitter, and we got a pretty similar response. And I would say that I actually don't have the older poll pulled up. I would have to gather that data, but it got, I want to say like almost 1 million hits in terms of the people sharing it and it, getting out on Twitter. So it's a pretty hotly contested subject. And, I think that it goes to show that people have really lost faith in their institutions. The military is an institution, and look at how much the military has changed over the last couple of years, and especially, from about 2020 on, it's been a very different environment. They got rid of a lot of the older guard, if you will, and a lot of the soldiers that are being brought in now are definitely of a different political mindset and a different ideology. And, the military is a breeding ground for, good ideas and bad ideas. And, I guess we can only, speculate on how that would end up looking in a long-term type of situation. I mean, none other than Joe Biden himself said that, he's willing to confiscate guns, or at least they hinted towards the idea of being willing to confiscate guns if they needed to. And there's never been a harder push for gun control. And we all know that gun control as a general idea is a very bad overall idea when you give the government the keys to Pandora's box. And essentially what you allow them to have is a monopoly on violence. And that's a very scary thing that we should not ever support. So the sort of, kicker here would be that, okay, say that they do get their leftist utopia and they collect all the guns from at least all the people that they don't like. Well, then they have a monopoly on violence. And now you've already got a, politically motivated sector of the military who has a certain political ideology that may not exactly line up with the bulk of people who own guns. And that's kind of a scary idea. So what this poll tells us is that people don't have faith in their institutions, and the military is one of our institutions in a way. I come from sort of the old guard in a way that, we would never even imagine in a million years doing harm to a civilian, especially on this continent, right? In Iraq, I know that people tend to associate the Iraq war with a lot of civilians getting killed. And of course, there were a lot of innocent people that were unfortunately killed in the Iraq war. But I will say, from my perspective, we always conducted ourselves with a great degree of care and attention. And we were always very careful to make sure that, everything we did was by the book. And we were very careful to not do any type of undue harm to anyone, and to try to make sure that we were very, very stringent in our methodology in terms of how we handled dealing with civilians. And I could never imagine a situation, right? I come from the sort of the Bush administration, like, that group of guys, and everything, but they always drilled in our head so hard that, oh, you're not required to carry out an unlawful order. Okay. That was a real big deal. They spent a lot of time telling us, hey, if an officer asks you to do something that's unlawful, or that, your conscience is telling you, hey, this don't feel right, then it probably ain't right. And you don't have to obey, an unlawful order. Now, when we go to this scenario here where we're talking about potentially the United States military firing on their own people, well, has that ever happened before? We are going to get into a couple of examples here. I have pre-selected some comments that I'd like to read from people there was over 2,000 comments, and I sorted through every single one of them, and I picked out the ones that I thought pretty much resonated. And one of the, sort of continuing themes with the comments that you're going to see is that with these comments, a lot of people had very, very similar types of, ideas in terms of what they came up with. So an overwhelming consensus in the comment section, generally all kind of agreed. So that's why I'm not going to try to go through too many comments, because these comments do represent the general consensus of what we're looking at. And plus, some of these comments were left by folks that, are a little bit larger on Twitter, some larger Twitter accounts and stuff that I want to share. So let's read some comments, and I'm also going to share some Wikipedia snaps from different things we're going to be talking about as we go, as well as you'll see these, these actual Twitter handles here on the screen as I go through and read. So one comment was from a guy called Old SF Dude, was an action guy, okay? He said that the circumstances dictate actions. I don't think it's cut and dry yes or no. And then I responded, spoken like SF, laugh out loud. Now, I wasn't trying to, have an underhanded quip there, but what I was trying to basically articulate to this guy was that, yes, that is true. That's a very SF way to look at it, right? Like, that situations will always dictate, if a civilian surrounds your group of dudes and starts trying to kill you all, well, then are you justified to defend yourself? Well, then, you know what I mean? Like, at that point, they're a combatant, not a civilian. So, yes, situations do dictate. So I think that that's a good way to look at it, that, the military is a microcosm of society, good and bad. Like, what do we have in our society? We have good and bad. We have evil people, good people, big people, small people, fat people, skinny people, black people, white people, and anything in between, whatever religion and creed, sexuality, you name it. All those different detractors that we look at in our society exist in a smaller microcosm in the military. So the military is just a microcosm of society at large, right? And the military does become this very socialized type environment. And over time, you have to be careful to get drawn into this sort of honeypot, if you will. And it is like a honeypot where, you look to your left and right, and there's someone else in a uniform. There's a rank structure. Everything is very regimented. Everything is provided for you. Medical attention. Your uniforms get cleaned. You name it. Whatever exists at large within society, the military provides in some form or fashion. So it is easy for someone within the military to kind of start thinking, well, maybe we are better than civilians. And look, don't kill the messenger, okay? I'm not saying that's the right way to think. I'm just trying to provide some context. A lot of military people come out of the other side of that situation with a very droll look at their fellow man, where they go, well, I was military, therefore I'm at some higher level, or my opinion matters a little more, or my status as a citizen is a little higher than you. Think about Starship Troopers, right? Like, if you've ever, the novel's actually pretty good, but the book does a pretty solid, the movie does a pretty solid job. But in the movie, they say, well, to even be a citizen, you have to serve in the military in Starship Troopers, to even get your citizenship. So that's kind of a scary idea. And really, Starship Troopers does sort of poke fun at the military-industrial environment, at the socialization of military and what it does to us, right? Like, I'm doing my part, you know what I mean? So I'm not saying that there aren't fine people that come out of the other side of the military-industrial complex, because some of the best human beings I've ever met were former military or police. So some of them are really awesome people, and it does give you an indication of the caliber of person that you're dealing with. But as this poll indicates, this is definitely a sketchy situation, because the DOD, the U.S. Army, the Marine Corps, the Air Force, you name it, the military at large obviously has a serious public relations problem on their hand, and maybe they don't even know that people feel this way. Maybe they need to do a better job of reaching out to the citizens and kind of reiterating that look, our oath is to the Constitution. When you raise your hand and swear that oath of enlistment, you are swearing an oath to the Constitution of the United States. You're not swearing an oath to the government. You're swearing an oath to the people. So that is where the danger is at in this. This question, this poll, does kind of lay out some very profound messaging once you get into these comments. And I'm going to pin this tweet for a while. So if you guys want to go and read through the comments, some of them are pretty enlightening. If you want to read through all of them, it's just interesting. All right. So thanks for that comment, old SF dude. All right. Our next comment is from Rob McNeely. He said, "They always do." That's true. Now, when he says they always do, what he's referring to is all the times in the past that the military has fired on their own people, right? And we're going to go into a lot of examples here before it's all said and done. But you've got Kent State, right? That situation where they shot, four students died and a whole score of them were wounded in the Kent State shooting. And in that situation, they were basically protesting involvement in the Vietnam War, and they brought the National Guard out, and the National Guard opened fire and killed 4 students and wounded some of them permanently, like in terms of permanent, like spinal injuries and everything. So that was a really terrible situation. I mean, obviously we can go into all sorts of detail there, but I mean, there are many situations. You look at Waco, Ruby Ridge. Now, some would say, well, that's a law enforcement operation. That's not really the same thing, but somebody had to drive the tanks at Waco. I guarantee it wasn't the CIA or FBI. It was somebody from the military driving those freaking tanks. So again, as old SF dude said, situations dictate, circumstances dictate. But at the end of the day, if something feels wrong, it's probably wrong. And I don't know about you, but if I was wearing a uniform and somebody said, hey, we need to go take all these guns, and if they resist, do what you have to do, I'm going to take issue with that. Now, I'm of the belief, without getting too far down the rabbit hole, I'm of the belief that probably a larger majority of military would probably not open fire on their own citizens, but I hold on to that kind of old school mentality that, we would never do anything to betray our oath. Okay. But then again, that's just me. And perhaps I'm, an exception, not the rule. Right now, the rule could be different. It could be that the majority of them, I know you've seen plenty of rants and things that some of these newer soldiers are putting up. I know you've seen some of them, and they seem to be pretty willing to do whatever's necessary to, adhere to their leftist agenda. All right, so we're going to go down the line here. There are quite a few comments. So I'm going to go through here. Okay, so we're going to go down the list of comments here. The next one is from Spike Cohen. All right, let's see what Spike Cohen had to say on Twitter about this poll. He said, they already have in the past, so yes. Obviously, that's an observation that you're going to see resonate quite often, all right, when it comes to all of the comments that we're going to be reading. So thanks, Spike, for weighing in on that. It's unfortunate, right, that we wind up having that type of view, but, you have to call it what it is. And after a while, if it quacks like a duck, it is a duck. Okay, so the Mises Caucus said, yes, they arguably have before, if you count the National Guard at Kent State and Delta Force at Waco. So there you go. Again, reiterating what I said before with, the military being used against civilians. Also, if you guys have never heard of the Wounded Knee Massacre, That was another situation. I'll put just a brief synopsis here. If you want to pause and read, you can. I'm not going to go through the Wikipedia article and give a whole lot of details, but there was over 300 Indians massacred by the United States government, and they were trying to confiscate their guns. The Indians wouldn't give up their guns, and the military opened fire. And before it was all said and done, there was a whole bunch of Native American Indians dead. I think they were Lakota, if I'm not mistaken. And that's terrible, right? You think, oh, the military would never fire on their own people. I don't care what anybody says, right? That your dominion as a soldier is the world at large in front of you. Like, you're responsible for the people around you. And I feel like that responsibility doesn't necessarily mean, oh, well, I can kill these people because some guy gave me orders and said I could do it. No, I feel like there's a responsibility to try to do the right thing. You know what I mean? Like, you are your brother's keeper, right? So, okay, just because you had some beef with the Indians at the time, was that reason to go shooting all of them? No. They brought out Hotchkiss freaking machine guns and all kinds of stuff. It was terrible. So there are many situations in the past where the government has happily shot their own people. And so to say that it can't happen, it has happened in the past. And that's what these type of comments kind of resonate towards. And there are just so many great comments in this Twitter feed. I mean, I could spend so much time reading them all. I'll just go through and just quickly, super briefly. I'm not going to take screenshots on every single one of them to share, but it's just crazy. The people, they all tend to kind of agree that, it's in line with the way that the poll turned out. There were a lot of people that were shocked at the results of the poll, and that was totally not what they expected to see in terms of the answer. So, there are just so many. There's several instances where they already have, obviously. That's, of course, mentioning that, the military has already used force against their own people before in the past. Sterling Reese here says that I think about 20 to 40% would refuse or avoid going along in some way. The rest would go along with it. You got to think there's never issue such orders on a bright sunny day when nothing is going on. There will be civil unrest, and they'll call the targets terrorists or something. Yeah, that's a great point, right? So it's just wild what people will do in the name of what they're told to do, and all they have to do is paint somebody with some derogatory term, and all of a sudden it's just going to make it okay. I think that it's important for folks that are in the military to really take a moment, you know what I mean, and really think hard about what you're doing before you do it, and really try to become an independent thinker. Think for yourself. Don't accept the spoon-fed information that's being brought into you. In fact, we're about to do a video about the Restrict Act, and it's got some scary connotations to it, which we won't get to in today's presentation. But I wanted to share this poll because I thought it was very thought-provoking, and it is scary because we're all sort of, ingrained in our minds here that, oh, well, the military would never harm their own people. That, you think about the way that the military has been in the last 20 years and, or the war on terror and everything like that. And it seems like, things were very patriotic. We all had a very distinctive sense of duty. Now, I'm not going to get into I'm not going to get in the weeds about how I feel about the war and whether or not we should have been involved in it. That's a whole nother topic, of course. But the point is, from a standpoint of patriotism and love for our country, we never really had a time that was better in that regard. The war on terror did do one thing, and it was bring us together. And, never were we more, united as a country in terms of, it's amazing what you can do to someone's psychological, profile and their thought process when you go, hey, well, there's the enemy. And America, if it's one thing that they hate more than someone killing their people, it's someone else killing them. And I know that's the weirdest thing to say, but it's true. There is nothing that will bring Americans together more than a common enemy that we all hate more than each other. And I know that's a terrible thing to say, but never in the history, or at least in recent history, were we more united than in that time. So now, you switch gears, and of course, The Afghanistan pullout was a complete debacle. Iraq was a complete debacle. Those wars are winding down. All that stuff is coming to an end. And now it's like Americans are twiddling their thumbs looking for the next boogeyman, right? There's already saber rattling with China. There's already talk of China trying to invade Taiwan. There's all the stuff going on in Ukraine with Russia and that war. And, we're basically fighting a proxy war with Russia, essentially. We're giving the Ukraine all this money and all this technology and weapons, and we're depleting our strategic reserves on fuel. We're, depleting our arsenal of, explosives and munitions and all the things that we need to protect ourselves. We've sent them HIMARS launchers, we've sent them Bradleys, we've sent them Abrams tanks, we've sent them Humvees, MRAPs, all kinds of vehicles, support, ammunition, medical supplies. And at the end of the day, okay, is it probably valid to say that the situation that's going on in Ukraine, that, that Russia should be defeated in the big scheme of things? Well, Russia was the aggressor. I'm not going to get into this particular subject in this video. I didn't really want that to be about that. I'll get back to the main subject. The point is, what I'm trying to articulate really is that, America is sort of without an enemy in terms of, the way that I mentioned it before, like that. Right now, you are the enemy. Like, they went from hating the Taliban and hating whatever, dictators and whatever random widget they're going to plug in to get you to go fight their wars and everything like that. It went from that to, now the conservative American at large is now the enemy. I mean, look at the FBI, okay, putting out all of this information. We already did a video on it, the domestic violent extremism and all this stuff, and trying to paint average people in the United States as somehow being, extremists or violent or something, just because they hold a certain ideology true. And honestly, just because they hold the American ideology true, what it means to be American, self-sufficiency, owning firearms to protect yourself, essentially serving your community. I mean, these are all ideals that many conservatives hold true. And to think that here we have these alphabet agencies being weaponized against us, and every single day you see something going on where they're trying to further weaponize this far leftist system against average Americans, right? It's a pretty scary time. And what this poll does is it sort of brings that back around and gives, hopefully, maybe the DOD is watching this, or the Army, or who the heck ever. Hopefully they're watching this and they understand that, sure, that's 52,000 people in that poll, and that may not be the biggest poll in the world, but that's 50,000 people, man. I mean, that's a decent poll in terms of kind of figuring out where people's heads are at. That's just as good a polling data as you could ask for in any respect. And I would even argue that if you went through some of the traditional polling websites, there's no way you get this good of a result. Because they would go and ask, people in Washington, D.C., what do you think they're going to say? Of course, they're going to lick the boot, because that's just what they do up there. They're living in their own little world up there. D.C. is its own little universe, that just sort of operates, in spite of everything else. Like it's its own little microcosm of government. And that's a scary thing. And I hope that maybe they're listening and they understand that, the DOD, the military has a serious PR problem. And not to mention that, not only do they have a PR problem, but that PR problem also goes into recruitment, into retention, right? They're having a hard time keeping good soldiers in. People are retiring early. They're getting out, or they refused the vaccine and got kicked out, right? So there's a huge group of people, probably a lot of really good soldiers, that got kicked out over this whole thing. And what did they replace them with? They're lowering their standards. They're lowering their physical fitness standards. They're letting just anybody in, and you're going to have a lower quality of recruits, right? And in the big scheme of things, that also winds up meaning that your readiness is affected. You don't have as capable of a fighting force. They're not as mentally, sharp. They're not as physically fit. They're not as well trained. They're not as well equipped. I mean, we sent all the billions of dollars of equipment to the Taliban and left it with them. We're giving all these billions of dollars in aid to the Ukraine, sending all of our munitions and all of our ammo and everything over there. Well, what about us? Where are we going to sharpen our spear? And I suppose that's where a lot of people's minds are at with this thing right now. You have to look at it from a standpoint of readiness, recruitment, retention, all that sort of stuff. And I believe that that ball is getting dropped in a lot of different ways. So hopefully this particular video might be thought-provoking for some of you. Let me know below how you feel about this certain situation, and maybe we'll do a revisit on this some months down the road. We'll ask the question again and see if opinions have changed a little bit. So I just want to put this out there, and definitely a thought-provoking poll. So I wanted to share it. I hope you all have a great day. Thanks so much for tuning in. Many more videos on the way. We'll see you soon.